tumbled around.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of evidence, like the spring, that big Joplin tornado, there's this video of these people locked in a cooler, or, ran to the cooler in the convenience store for safety. And you hear, everybody screaming when the tornado was tearing the place up, but you didn't hear it whoosh through, so it didn't tear the walls off of the cooler. But after it was done with, everyone's saying, well, is that you under me? Is that your leg on top of me? So obviously the people have been jostled around. And you also saw the camera flying around.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't a moving wind tunnel through that cooler they're in. But they were levitated and tumbled around.
Now, this has to be the result of some kind of interference with electromagnetic fields or charge, or I'm not a scientist, but this is dealing with electromagnetism, isn't it?
Right. It turns out electricity, magnetism, and gravity all interact. So
okay.
It's possible to affect gravity with magnetism. And as I think we all had the experience as youngsters, getting a nail and wrapping a wire coil around it and stick it in a 9-volt battery, and it turns the magnet into, turns the electricity into a magnet. Mm-hmm. The nail becomes a magnet. Also, we learned that if you move a conductor through a magnetic field, you get electricity, which is how Nikola Tesla, he discovered alternating current and applied it to harnessing the energy from the Niagara Falls power plant.
Mm-hmm.
So we can turn electricity into magnetism. We can turn magnetism into electricity. But we can also affect gravity with magnetism.
So just from what we're talking about so far, there had to be some kind of electromagnetics in play. And you were talking about tornadoes and how they have this effect where they can pick things up without harming them through this gravitational effect and land them or set them down somewhere. But you don't have dustification with tornadoes. There's more than that at play here.
Right. You sometimes do, but or destruction, and that's just when it's randomly kind of oriented. And there are aspects of the WTC complex that reminded me of tornadoes.
How so?
Building 4, the main body of Building 4 disappeared, turned into dust, went away, and just left the north wing standing, or most of the north wing standing, mm-hmm. as though it was cut off with an X-Acto knife. And one story below ground in that area, you see some people walking through the mall. And then another story below that, in the parking garage area, it looks totally unaffected.
Mm-hmm. Yes, totally unaffected.
As though it happened from the ground up. A few little punch-throughs the ground here and there. But where did the main body of Building 4 go? And it reminded me so much of an experience I had as a child going through Topeka, Kansas, right after that horrendous tornado that went through. You could look through this into this apartment building that had been sliced in two.
Mm-hmm.
There's a made bed in there with magazines still on the bed, books on the dresser, and clothes hanging in the closet that weren't messed up.
Yes, and your book is riddled with these kinds of surreal photographs. There are photographs of cars in which the back half of the car looks fine. A police car, for example, half of the lights are undamaged. The rest of the car is completely toasted.
Right, even to the point of eating out the metal. They don't drive old junkers around.
Right. The metal is eaten out, and yet the other half of the car is totally intact.
Like it just came off the showroom floor.
Exactly. It doesn't even have scratches on the paint, it looks like.
Plastic police lights on the top on one side look untouched, and they would melt pretty easily.
Yes. And again, what can cause something like that? I'm not suggesting that you tell us, what did happen, but I'm saying what can cause that kind of thing.
When I see an abrupt change, especially between the front seat door and the back seat door, I start thinking about a rubber gasket between the two.
Mm-hmm.
That maybe it had some electrical or something that sealed from the phenomenon continuing further. But the other side of it, where it has that circular spot that's unaffected, that was a big aha moment for me. With the background in interferometry, I know that you can have one beam or another, but where they interfere, you get a different effect.
So explain
And
that to us a little more regarding these cars.
well, it's kind of like, contact print with the photographic film. You see an abrupt area, not shades of gray.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something that caused the toasting, and then 1 nanometer over, it was in pristine condition. Fires don't do that.
So are you saying there was a type of interference that would occur to change that?
That would easily explain that, some type of interference, where because otherwise you would have a tapering off effect.
Right. That makes sense.
You see cars that are burned from, and I'm not going to say toast, I'm going to say burned, from a car fire that we know is a car fire. You'll see at the edge of where it stops burning, toasted area and it's charred, and then less and less, and then it's pristine. There's a transition zone.
Yes.
But to have something abrupt, it's like photographic masking.
Yes.
In a way.
Yes, it's again, I mean, there's a surreal quality to that photograph, but also many, many other photographs. Another one that was, to me, I just kept staring at it was, I think it's figure 104 in your book, where you have these steel core columns, which I guess you'd, I mean, it looks like they're vaporizing, but that's not the right word, as you say. It's dustifying. They're there and they're solid, and then they start becoming almost like apparitions, and then they're gone in the same shape.
I would like to point out something here that my detractors often say, well, it fell down. So what if it fell down? You still need to explain what happened here, because in the first image, the building is coming apart right next to it and going down or going wherever it's going, and it peels away like peeling a banana, and you're left with these core columns standing up.
Yes.
And they are crisp. You have blue sky in the background, and they have crisp edges. And then you see them getting fuzzy, and then you see just, fuzz there.
Fuzz, in the same, but in the same shape, in the same place. The fuzz.
Right. And my detractors say, well, it shook off dust that was resting on it, that had settled on it before it dropped, because it's so fine it hung in the air. Well, if dust is that so fine that it hung in the air, how come you didn't see it in the first frame?
Yeah, I was going to say you wouldn't. Yeah, exactly. That.
How did it settle instantly and then hang in the air later? So this argument stands regardless of if you say it fell over. I can't imagine how a 700-foot tall column could drop into a hole in the ground.
Yeah. There was no evidence for that.
And it didn't tip over because it would take out a few blocks worth of buildings.
Right. So there's no evidence for it falling down.
Right.
And going into the whole theory of the controlled demolition, I mean, we haven't really talked about any of the science, but you have very specific, many pages in the book devoted to why even the idea of a nanothermite technology could not have been the source of bringing down of the buildings. Could you go ahead and explain in only minimally scientific terms what that's about?
Okay. In a way, it's that, I like to say by thermite, do you mean powdered aluminum and powdered iron rust? That's what thermite is typically.
Yeah.
And I have no doubt that was there in the dust. Because, that's my point. The buildings turned to dust, and the buildings were made out of steel structures with aluminum cladding. So if that turned to dust and nano-sized particles, that's what you'd have in the dust.
And not only that, you saw this, you were seeing evidence of very rapid rusting of certain of the pieces that would go way beyond any kind of rusting process that would normally happen, as though it was rusting on speed.
Right. If you've ever left an iron skillet in the sink soaking,
mm-hmm.
and you scrubbed it so it's real clean in one area, that area pretty soon turns bright orange
mm-hmm.
from the rust because it's pure iron. Pure iron will rust. Steel structures have that type of steel has other components, carbon and other add-ins that enhance its structural properties and enhance its ability to resist environmental degradation,
mm-hmm.
like from rust. So if this rusts quickly, that means its properties have changed. And if it lets go of these other doodads, like, the iron molecules separate from the carbon,
mm-hmm.
like, the surface is partly dissolved.
Mm-hmm.
That would explain instant rusting.
Yes, that would explain it. But what would it take for that to happen, for these molecules to part?
Molecular dissociation.
Yes, how could that happen?
Well, usually molecules are attracted to each other and locked onto each other. And let's say somehow you could turn a switch and cause them to do the reverse, to repel each other.
Mm-hmm.
That is what it looked like was happening when this building kind of billowed out into dust.
What could cause that?
Certain types of energy fields interfering.
Okay, well, we're going to get to that in a second then in a little more detail. I wanted to continue on this whole area with the steel beams and the supposed debris and rusting. But the steel, I think we all remember where they said, well, all this excess steel, the steel scrap was shipped to China. Now, what you're saying here is that by September 13th in the morning, so that would have to mean on the 12th, what?
Actually, some of those pictures were taken on the 11th, but they weren't logged in until the 12th. So just to be extra safe, I used the caption date. But if you look at the camera info data, it's the 11th.
Okay, so here we are. People are literally just trying to get the dust off their clothing and shake their head and figure out what just happened to me, what just happened to this city, what happened to everybody else. And at this same time, the steel had already been scooped up and shipped off to China?
Exactly. Pretty good cover story, isn't it?
Well, it's stupid. I mean, that's just stupid.
Towards the beginning, to get a lighthearted moment, I'd say, oh, where is that steel? Oh, it's hiding across the street under that hubcap.
Well, and the point is, where was the steel? I mean, how much steel are we talking about here? That was shipped off to China, right? How much? I mean, what did they say they had managed to accumulate and ship to China?
I'm guessing there's two beams, because then they could say beams, plural, and not be lying.
So the point is, there wasn't a lot of steel to ship off to China, but what a story. Oh, we had our people on it. We were prepared. We had these massive steel beams, lots of them, piled up, shipped them off to China within 24 hours of the building going down. I mean, when I say stupid, I mean, it's absolutely absurd.
It makes no sense.
It makes no sense.
Exactly. And those columns that dustified before our very eyes.
Yes.
The base of those, I believe, is Stairwell B, and there were 14 people who survived in Stairwell B. The rest of the building dustified around them, and they were left in Stairwell B.
Interesting.
And when they came out, as this one of the firefighters said, I looked and said, guys, there used to be 106 floors above us, and now I'm seeing sunshine. There's nothing above us. That big building doesn't exist.
Right.
And he later said, these are the biggest office buildings in the world, and I didn't see one desk, one chair, one phone, nothing.
Yeah. And yet there was another photo there of something that was showing up in the debris later. I can't remember what building it came from now. And it was just the oddest photograph because it was of a ball of compressed metal from the Ben & Jerry's store.
Oh, right.
That had
little like a football.
Yeah, like a football that had intact pieces of $20 bills, corners of $20 bills sticking out of this compressed metal. This makes no sense.
And colored dividers.
And colored dividers. I mean,
it was the only file cabinet found.
I mean, how did they even know it was a file cabinet? It looked like a football of metal.
It's true. And they were able to identify what store it was from, and they called up the store owner and said, hey, we got